Assalamu alaikum, I am Dr. Mariam. I will be teaching you about next part of autoimmune blistering disorder. In the last lecture, I told you about pemphigus vulgaris. Now we'll be talking about bullous pemphigoid, deeper down the blistering disorders. Now, basically, what is bullous pemphigoid? It is again an autoimmune blistering disorder. Age of onset is 60 to 80 years, equal incidence in both males and females, and it is relatively the most common bullous autoimmune disease. Regarding from your exam point of view, bullous pemphigoid can come as an SCQ, and most commonly MCQs come from today's lecture. Etiology and pathogenesis. Interaction of autoantibody with bullous pemphigoid antigen BPAG1 and BPAG2, that is bullous pemphigoid antigen 1 and 2. Antigen 2 is against the collagen type 17 in hemidesmosomes of basal keratinocytes. Now, as I told you in the last lecture about what are desmosomes. Desmosomes are basically the junctions who keep the keratinocytes in the epidermis joined together. And now, what are hemidesmosomes? They are basically the junctions which keep the basal layer keratinocytes bound to the dermoepidermal junction. Okay, followed by complement activation and attraction of neutrophils and eosinophils. Bullous lesion results from interaction of multiple bioactive molecules released from the inflammatory cells. Okay. So first of all, there is interaction of autoantibody with bullous pemphigoid antigens, which is then followed by complement activation. Okay. Now, this is a picture which is showing the dermoepidermal junction. You can see the desmosomes. What they do is that they join the keratinocytes together. And what are hemidesmosomes? What they do is that they join the basal keratinocytes with the basement membrane zone, which has got lamina lucida and lamina densa. Okay, and bullous pemphigoid antigen 1 and bullous pemphigoid antigen 2, they are both present in the lamina lucida. Okay, from this picture you can assess that in pemphigus vulgaris all the antigens they were present in the epidermis, whereas in bullous pemphigoid they are present deeper down. So the lesions, that is the bullae of pemphigus vulgaris, they are flaccid. When the patient comes to you, they are already ruptured. Whereas in case of bullous pemphigoid, they are tense because they are deeper down than the epidermis. So to understand the lesions, you have to know the underlying pathology which is going on along with the anatomy. Now, regarding the clinical manifestation, it often starts with a prodromal eruption, urticarial papular lesions, evolves in weeks to months to bullae formation that may appear suddenly as a generalized eruption. Initially, there may be no symptoms except moderate or severe pruritus. Later, tenderness of the eroded lesions may be seen. No constitutional symptoms except in very severe disease. Erythematous, papular or urticarial type lesions may be the first lesions which may appear in the patients with bullous pemphigoid. So, this is sometimes also known as the prodrome. Bullae, they are large, dense, firm-topped, oval or round, may arise in normal, erythematous or urticarial skin, contain serous or hemorrhagic fluid. The eruption may be localized or generalized, as I told you before. It is usually scattered but also grouped in archiform and serpiginous patterns. Bullae rupture less easily than in pemphigus. I told you why. What is the reason for that? Sometimes large, bright red, oozing and bleeding erosions become a major problem. Usually, however, the originally tense bullae collapse and transform into crusts. Regarding the sites of involvement, axillae, medial aspects of thighs, groins, abdomen, flexor aspects of forearms, lower legs often is the first manifestation is on the lower legs. Mucous membranes, they are practically only in the mouth and also very rarely, less severe and painful and less easily ruptured than in pemphigus. So basically, bullous pemphigoid mostly does not involve the mucous membranes, but when it does, then it is called the cicatricial pemphigoid. Cicatricial means scarring. Now this is this picture. You can well appreciate that there is a tense bulla and next to it there is an urticarial plaque with central erosions. On the right side, you can see the dorsal aspects of the hand. There is bulla and erosions are present, and along with some scaling and crusting is visible as well. Now, this is bullous pemphigoid tense blisters, and on the area on which the bullae are arising, it is erythematous. Now regarding the biopsy, regarding the diagnosis, first of all you will have to go for skin biopsy, and on light microscopy neutrophils in indial file alignment and dermal epidermal junction, and the cells which are found are neutrophils, eosinophils and lymphocytes in the papillary dermis. Basically the level of split is subepidermal, that is why the bullae are tense. Electron microscopy, junctional cleavage, that is split, occurs in the lamina lucida of the basement membrane. Immunopathology, linear IgG deposits along the basement membrane zone. C3, which may occur in the absence of IgG sometimes as well. So the linear IgG deposits along the basement membrane along with C3 is diagnostic on immunopathology for bullous pemphigoid. In serum, circulating anti-basement membrane IgG antibodies, they are detected by indirect immunofluorescence. Titers do not correlate with the course of disease. Autoantibodies in bullous pemphigoid recognize two types of antigens, as I told you before: bullous pemphigoid antigen 1 and bullous pemphigoid antigen 2, which is a transmembranous polypeptide type 17 collagen. On hematology, that is, if you go ahead for having complete blood count, eosinophilia may be present, but it is not always there. But in the skin biopsy, when you see the cells which are most dominating in the histopathology, they are eosinophils in case of bullous pemphigoid. Regarding the management, its treatment is almost the same as that of pemphigus vulgaris, but the difference is that the dose of oral steroids is much less required. Starting doses of 50 to 100 mg per day, continued until clear, either alone or combined with azathioprine. Azathioprine may be used 150 mg daily for remission induction and 50-100 mg for maintenance. Plasmapheresis, sulfones, dapsone is used in case of bullous pemphigoid, which is not used in case of pemphigus vulgaris, which is another difference. Methotrexate, low dose methotrexate is given topical in very mild cases, and for local recurrences, topical glucocorticoid or topical tacrolimus therapy may be beneficial. Tetracyclines along with nicotinamide has been reported to be effective because it acts as an immunomodulator, because it is an autoimmune disorder. Regarding the course and prognosis, patients often go into a permanent remission after therapy. It is better as compared to pemphigus vulgaris. They do not require further therapy. Local recurrences can sometimes be controlled with topical glucocorticoids, clobetasol with occlusion to urticarial areas, intralesional triamcinolone for localized disease, and sometimes the cases go into spontaneous remission without even any therapy. Now, as I told you about the scarring pemphigoid, that is cicatricial pemphigoid, which can involve the mucosa. It is a rare disease, and mostly it involves the elderly people. Another important thing for bullous pemphigoid is that as it affects the patients who are in the third decade of life, so it has got an association with underlying malignancy as well. Skin involved in 30% of the cases in cases of cicatricial pemphigoid. Blisters rupture easily. Also erosion resulting from epithelial fragility in mouth, oropharynx. Rarely other mucosa may be involved, like rectal esophageal mucosa. Ocular manifestations, they initially manifest as unilateral or bilateral conjunctivitis with burning, dryness and foreign body sensation. Chronic involvement leads to scarring and symblepharon formation, and in cases when the disease is very severe, there is fusion of the bulbar and palpebral conjunctiva. Entropion and trichiasis can also occur, and as a result of that there can be keratinopathy, corneal neovascularization, and in the end it can lead to blindness. Now this is a picture which is showing the scarring which is seen in the eye. Scarring may also be present in the larynx. Esophageal involvement can lead to stricture formation and Brunting peripemphigoid. Subset of patients whose skin lesions recur at the same sites, mainly on the head and neck, also lead to scarring. Antigens which are involved in case of cicatricial pemphigoid, they are bullous pemphigoid antigen 2, laminin 5, integrin, subunits beta 4, type 7 collagen. This is not important from your exam point of view. Management is the same like that of bullous pemphigoid. Dapsone with low dose prednisolone, and sometimes the patient may require aggressive immunosuppressive treatment like cyclophosphamide, azathioprine, or in combination with glucocorticoids. And the difference with bullous pemphigoid is that it might need surgical intervention because of the scarring issue. Now, another important thing is pemphigoid gestationis, which is important from your exam point of view in case of MCQs only. It is a rare pruritic and polymorphic inflammatory bullous dermatosis of pregnancy and the postpartum period. It usually begins from the 4th to the 7th month of pregnancy, but can also occur in the first trimester and in the immediate postpartum period. And the important thing to remember in that is that it may be repeated in the further pregnancies which the patient will be having. But another thing is that in that case it will be starting more earlier during the pregnancy as compared to the first presentation. Clinical features: it is an extremely pruritic vesicular eruption mainly on the abdomen but also on other areas, and again there is sparing of the mucous membranes. Lesions vary from erythematous, edematous papules to urticarial plaques to vesicles and even tense bullae formation. It can be exacerbated by use of estrogen and progesterone containing medications, which might be given during pregnancy for some other reasons. Some 5% of babies born to mothers with pemphigoid gestationis have urticarial, vesicular or bullous lesions, which resolve spontaneously during the first several weeks. Maximum they stay for 6 weeks. Now this is a picture which is showing, you can see the vesicles and bullae, and they are again tense. Skin biopsy: it is a subepidermal blistering condition, so that is why again the tense bullae formation, and there is a heavy linear deposition of C3 along the basement membrane zone. Sometimes IgG deposition is roughly present in 30% of the patients. So the difference in bullous pemphigoid and this pemphigoid gestationis biopsy is that IgG deposition is always present with or without C3 along the basement membrane zone, whereas in this C3 is always present. Sometimes IgG may also be present. On immunofluorescence, serum contains IgG anti-basal membrane antibodies. ELISA and immunoblotting detect the autoantibodies in greater than 70%, which are directed to BP, bullous pemphigoid 180, that is type 17 collagen. The good thing about this is that no significant maternal morbidity and mortality other than the pruritus for the patient, that's for the mother. Slight increase in premature and small for gestational age births. Some reports of fetal prognosis have revealed significant fetal death and premature deliveries. But other cases show that there is no increase in fetal mortality. So basically, regarding the management, you have to suppress the blister formation and relieve the intense pruritus, and for that prednisolone is the first line of treatment because it is not harmful to the baby as well. 20 to 40 mg per day is given, but sometimes higher doses are required. Prednisone is tapered gradually during the postpartum period. Only a few patients do not require systemic prednisolone. It can be managed with antihistamines and topical steroids. Now, another important thing which I think you must be knowing the name at least because of its association with celiac disease. The skin presentation with celiac disease is dermatitis herpetiformis. What it is basically, it is a chronic, recurrent, intensely pruritic eruption occurring symmetrically on the extremities and the trunk. It has got two ages of onset, 20 to 60 years, but most common at 30 to 40 years, and it may also occur in children. Male to female ratio, it is more common in males, and it is associated, as I told you, with celiac disease, that is gluten sensitive enteropathy. Regarding the etiology and pathogenesis, it is probably related to IgA deposits in the skin. Patients, they have antibodies to transglutaminases that may be the major autoantigen in this disease. Epidermal transglutaminase autoantibody probably binds to transglutaminase in the gut and circulates either alone or as immune complexes and deposits in the skin. With additional factors, Ig activates complement via the alternate pathway with subsequent chemotaxis of neutrophils releasing their enzymes and producing tissue injury. So the most dominant inflammatory cell which is present, it is neutrophil in cases of dermatitis herpetiformis, whereas in bullous pemphigoid they are eosinophils. Now regarding the clinical manifestations, as I told you, that is an intensely itchy disorder which is episodic. Burning or stinging of the skin may be seen, and very rarely pruritus may be absent. Symptoms often precede the appearance of skin lesions by 8 to 12 hours. Ingestion of iodides and overload of gluten are the exacerbating factors. Regarding the systemic review, laboratory evidence of small bowel malabsorption is detected in 10 to 20%, And gluten-sensitive enteropathy occurs in nearly all patients and is demonstrated by the small bowel biopsy, which will show the atrophy of the villi. Regarding the skin lesions, they consist of erythematous papules of wheel-like plaques, tiny firm-topped vesicles, sometimes hemorrhagic, occasionally bulle formation. Lesions are arranged in groups, hence the name herpetiformis, because in herpes simplex there is grouping of the vesicles. Distribution is strikingly symmetric. Scratching results in excoriation and crust formation, post-inflammatory hyper and hyperpigmentation at sites of healed lesions. Regarding the sites of involvement, most diagnostic is the extensor areas are most predominantly involved, like elbows, knees, buttocks, scapular and sacral areas, often in a butterfly fashion. Scalp, face and even the hairline may be involved. Now this is the picture showing tense bulle formation along with vesicular formation is also seen, and there is underlying the skin is erythematous. Sites of predilection, as you can see, they are here, extensor aspects, elbows, knees, then the sacral area, the scapular area, interscapular area may be involved as well. Regarding the diagnosis, skin biopsy best from the early erythematous papule, microabscesses, polymorphonuclear cells and eosinophils at the tips of dermal papillae, dermal infiltration of neutrophils and eosinophils, and again the split or the bulla is subepidermal. Immunofluorescence of the perilesional skin, it is not necessary that you have to take the specimen of the involved skin only. It is taken best from the buttocks, granular IgA deposits in tips of papillae that correlate well with small bowel disease. Granular IgA is found in almost normal skin in most patients and is diagnostic. Other tests which can be done, these are for the circulating autoantibodies, anti-reticular antibodies of the IgA and IgG types, thyroid antimicrosomal antibodies, antinuclear antibodies. Ig antibodies, they bind to the intermyofibril substance of smooth muscles, that is anti-endomysial antibodies. Other studies for malabsorption, steatorrhea, dialose absorption, anemia secondary to iron or folate deficiency, and when you go ahead for endoscopy of small bowel, it will show blunting and flattening of the villi in small bowel as in cases of celiac disease. Now regarding the systemic therapy, the first line of treatment is dapsone. If the patient is not having its side effect, the most common side effect of dapsone is methemoglobinemia, which is mostly present in those patients who have got glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. 100 to 150 mg per daily dose is given with gradual reduction to 50 to 25 mg and often as low as 50 mg twice a week. And there is a dramatic response to it within hours. Glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase level, it should be done before starting the sulfones, which is more commonly, if it is some deficiency is seen, it is mostly in males. Obtain methemoglobin levels in the initial 2 weeks and follow blood counts carefully for the first few months. Then you can go ahead with sulfapiridine 1 to 1.5 gram per day with plenty of fluids. Diet, a gluten-free diet may suppress the disease or allow reduction of the dosage of dapsone or sulfapiridine, but response is very slow. Now, I hope you have understood what I have told you, but if there are any queries, you can ask me. Now, these are the multiple choice questions. They are 3 in number. This is question number 1. Then this is question number 2, question 3, and 4th is the short essay question. Okay? Thank you.